Before we get started, I would like to share some information about Dr. Innocent Adosha. Dr. Innocent Adosha is a board-certified family physician whose focus of practice is minority health and wellness as a means to obtain optimal well-being. He graduated from Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, and completed his family medicine residency at the University of Florida here in Gainesville. Adosha's medical interests include community health, preventive health, international health, overseas medical missions, anti-aging, longevity medicine, and aerospace medicine. His hobbies include nature photography and philosophy, and he is an avid ping pong player. So, Dr. Adosha, I'm turning everything over to you.
All right, everybody, good evening. I am Dr. Adosha. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. You know, as you mentioned earlier, my focus in medicine is really what can we do to regain and restore our health, right? Yes, as a physician, we're trained to treat patients, prescribe medications, et cetera. But really, the way to really obtain optimal healthcare is not necessarily by, quote, medications, but really to go back and start from the beginning and try to say, what can we do to restore our health so that we don't end up being a victim of chronic medical conditions that can be prevented. So I know that probably, you know, most of us have family members, friends, or acquaintances that have chronic conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, hyperlipidemia. Now, all these conditions ultimately lead to things like stroke, heart attacks. But believe this, all these conditions can be prevented. They're all preventable. You know, there's just no reason for anyone, for all of us to become victims to this. So here's usually how I like to start my presentations. I like to open up a forum to the audience. I want to know what do people want me to talk about? Because I don't want to talk about what I want to talk about. I want to talk about what the audience would like to hear about from me.
I think when I looked at the title, it was something in the midst of chaos. I can't remember.
Yes.
But what I was kind of anticipating was how our physical health, in the midst of everything that we're going on, how it can play a role in our mental health, kind of being really affected by the thing that's going on physically, how that could affect our mental health.
Sure. So here's the thing, right? I mean, our bodies are connected. The brain, the body, it's all one. So things that come from externally that gets into a brain has a huge effect on what happens to us physically as well. So yes, the pandemic has taken a lot of toll on all of us, right? So the focus for us in primary care is that we want to make sure that everyone continues to pay attention to the basic nature of what they need to do for themselves to stay healthy, right? So I'm not sure if anyone is aware of this. There's been a huge decline in all the preventative care measures, such as breast cancer screening. As of 2020, there was only about 10% of preventative care screenings that were done. So colon cancer screening, mammograms, labs, all the things that we normally do to make sure that we know where people are and what can we do to keep them healthy. Only about 10% of those were done. So we want to make sure, even though there's a lot of chaos with the pandemic and such, that we do not forget to put out some time to go and take care of ourselves. And now, this thing doesn't necessarily mean that you got to go to a doctor's office, right? There's a lot of stuff that we can do, you know, just like it said, you know, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And that is absolute truth. get out, activity, walk, basic things like that makes a huge difference on the outcome of what happens to all of us. So, normally what we do in practice, of course, is to manage patients who have chronic diseases. But the paradigm is shifting, where we want to concentrate more on risk factors and what do we do to mitigate the risk factors that really make us sick. 80% of all sickness or of all illnesses can be prevented. Hypertension, diabetes, stroke, heart attack, dementia, right? All those things are prevented. People come to us because either they haven't been taught early in life that there are certain things that we can all do to put ourselves at a minimum risk for all these conditions. But unfortunately, we live in a chaotic society where we've got all these outside influences that are pushing on one direction, that tell us we have to do this. Corporate America, I'm not anti-corporations, but there are a lot of corporations out there who will profit from selling us things that necessarily has no benefit in our health. And it's time that we start to learn about those things that we need to not not spend our dollars on. And those are important things that really needs to be talked about, if not now, sometime in the future.
So Dr. Adocha, so you mentioned dementia can be avoided, and it seems that dementia is something that's very prevalent in our communities, and it's extremely stressful and weighs on the mental health of caregivers, as well as those who are going into and suffering from it with all the changes and their independence being challenged. How can you avoid? What are things that we can do to avoid this disease that seems becoming a norm in our community, dementia?
Well, so the main issue that leads to chronic illness. So most dementia, it's due to what we call white matter disease. Of course, what we are eating, diet, right? So whole natural foods. So what I tell my patients, it's this, basically, right? If God didn't if whatever you're eating was not made by God, it's probably not good for you. And that's where you avoid dementia. And point being, processed foods that are devoid of any nutrition, right? There are tons of evidence, studies that show that processed foods, right? And processed foods are mostly processed animal meat, sausage, hot dogs, bologna, bacon, all those foods have been shown to be a big risk factor for cardiovascular disease, which is the number one factor that leads to dementia. All right. So when people eat the wrong things,
say that again. What's the number one thing for dementia?
Cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease. So the same thing that causes stroke, causes heart attack, that causes kidney disease, that causes leg amputation. The same spectrum of diseases and the same spectrum of conditions are the same conditions that leads to the high risk of dementia. Now, we have dementia that's caused by Alzheimer's dementia, which is a little bit of a different issue. And that is also caused by when people have this something called amyloid plaques that build up in the brains. There's evidence to also support that amyloid plaques are caused by man-made materials, right? Processed things that we put into our bodies. Right. So those are the things that have been shown to lead to all those things. So if you look at communities that are not big into processed foods, they do have a lower risk of dementia and lower risk of cardiovascular disease. So there's a book called The Blue Zone. The blue zone is, there's a gentleman that used to work for National Geographic. He had traveled all over the world. And based on his observation, he found out that, listen, there are communities I go to where people are living to be hundreds, 101, 105, healthy and alert and mentally together. And the final conclusion he found out was really, it's about what these communities eat. All right, the communities that consume lots of processed foods are the ones who have become victims to having lots of cardiovascular diseases. And of course, that also includes physical activity, diabetes. So right now in America, right, 1/3 of all adults in America either have diabetes or pre-diabetes, right? We didn't have diabetes in the 60s, especially in the Black community. If you go back in the 1940s, the Black community in America didn't have it. Diabetes was not even existent, right? And diabetes then was thought to be something that really white patients got. You know, we didn't have it. But as things changed, most people left the South and moved to communities in the North, and employment change where we're doing mostly sedentary jobs. Diabetes spiked. So right now in America, right, diabetes is the most expensive disease that anybody can have, because that leads to everything else. It leads to heart attack, it leads to stroke, it leads to dementia, it leads to leg amputation, it leads to dialysis, it leads to all that. And the big factor is the increased consumption of processed foods. Right. So going back to what we were saying earlier, it's really important for all of us to be aware of what we need to have done to ourselves at a certain age. There are certain things in medicine that we recommend that every age group gets done. And that should be something that everybody needs to know. Just like we know certain information about ourselves, we should know when you hit a certain milestone, you should be aware. I'm 21, I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 50, and 60, 70. What healthcare things do I need to make sure that I've had done when I reach those ages?
So Dr. Adosha, so you mentioned back in the 40s, we didn't even struggle with things like diabetes. Do you think that, because I've also heard, well, not heard, I've experienced it, that suicide used to not be a thing that we would do. That was other communities did that stuff. We didn't give up. Do you think the effects of our health and wellness being reduced because of the issues that we're dealing with, I guess because of the foods that we're eating and things like that, do you think that connects to something like depression or some things that's increasing our suicide rate as our health decreases, our suicide rates increases with kind of dealing with those things? You think those are connected?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, we know that increased suicidality also goes with increase in substance use disorder. So we do realize that increased alcohol abuse, drug abuse, those things are also a big factor. And of course, as things we see on social media, stress of trying to keep up with things that we see, that we feel that, oh, somebody else is here and there, that itself leads to a lot of stress. So again, the corporate nature of things where we're now all exposed to certain things, social media, of course, puts a lot of pressure that X, Y, and Z, someone else is doing this, someone else is doing that. That puts a lot of pressure on people to that may not be able to feel that they are not where their friends or their peers are. And that by itself also leads to a lot of increase in depression, which of course leads to suicidality. So the way to, of course, prevent all this is access to primary care. So when someone goes to a primary care doctor, yearly, we do something called a depression screen, standard. Every year, every patient, we have something called PHQ-9, which is called a patient health question 9. We ask questions like, in the last 2 weeks, have you felt down? And how much alcohol do you drink? Do you abuse substances? If you screen people for things, then you find out how you could help them. And without screening, you will never find those things out. So it's paramount that everybody, at least once a year, find a primary care provider and go and have your preventative care visit. So here's the deal, right? With the Affordable Care Act, every individual, if you have insurance, you are allowed one free visit a year to go to your doctor and have your annual exam, and it's free. There's no copay, zero, right? So that becomes that opportunity for your primary care provider to be able to screen you, right? So as a family physician, my goal is to have people have their preventative care visits, finding things early, finding disease early is the key. You find depression early, you treat it. You find high blood pressure early, you treat it. You find pre-diabetes early, you treat, and treating it doesn't necessarily mean that you got to take medication.
Okay.
All right. Medicines comes when primary prevention fails, right? And primary prevention, diabetes is not distant, right? Diabetes is not something that's written that anybody should get it, right? Even high blood pressure, yes, we know that the longer, if we all live long enough, we're going to get high blood pressure. But to the degree depends on how early you find it. So primary care is a key. Everybody should have once a year minimum, go and sit with somebody, a primary care provider, and make sure they've reviewed your what's called the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force. It's free. You go online, you type in USPSTF.gov, you put in your age, you put in your weight, put in your height, you put in your gender, and it tells you everything that you should have done once a year.
Dr. Adosha, I have a question.
Yeah, hi, good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I have a question regarding what you just said as it relates to depression. And so this is kind of, I guess it's hard to pinpoint, I guess, when somebody's depressed or when you're depressed. And I just assume that there are different levels and, phases. And I assume that depression can be situational, that you could be depressed based on a circumstance or something that happens in your life. And
Sure.
It may not be something that is drawn out. But how do you treat like depression? I guess I don't know how you treat depression without, I guess, if you're saying that it can be a phase where if you catch it early on, you may not need medication. How do I kind of know that, okay, I'm depressed? I see people walking around every day that looks like they are living life till its fullest. And if you have a conversation, they may say, suffering from depression. And I can't see it on the outside, but how do you treat the different levels of depression before you even get to a phase of medication?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Depression by itself, for a lot of people, also involves community engagement. All right, It's not most people who are depressed a lot of times is because they've drifted away from community. Right. So if somebody's engaged in the community, meaning family, friends, church, different engagement, and you engage people and talk to them, right? And your friends are able to notice, say, hey, I see something different here about you. I see that you're no longer engaged. You used to call and come to meetings. Now nobody sees you anymore, right? So if you have that connection, your friends, family, it's always a big factor. Most people who are depressed a lot of times is they drift away. There's not really anybody. They have no one close enough to them. And that's always the difficult part, that when you get somebody who's not engaged, then becomes difficult. But depression always doesn't have to be treated with meds, right? The best way to treat depression is not really by medication. It's something we call cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Essentially counseling. You go, you sit with somebody, you talk to them, especially if somebody becomes your cheerleader, help you solve issues. The reason a lot of times people get depressed is that we get into a situation and we feel that this situation is the end of everything. There's no outlet. You can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So when you sit with somebody and talk to them, somebody can present you with different perspectives. Hey, listen, this may seem like it's the worst thing ever happening to you, but nothing is permanent, right? Life goes into phases. And, unfortunately, sometimes it's difficult to get some people to understand that life, nothing, any situation becomes what it is forever. And it just takes a little bit of work. You got to put in some work and, but again, counseling, it's really the way. And it doesn't have to be by a medical profession, clergy, church involvement, social groups, all those things. But the key is to get the person to open up and tell you about those things. And for a lot of people, depression, of course, sometimes can also be, there's a lot of biological issues that goes with that. There's certain chemicals that we make in the brain that controls how we feel. But a lot of times we know that those chemicals are affected by traumas that we've had in our lives that were never addressed, right? So, the key with lots of things is past traumas that someone never addressed. And the person may not know that those are traumas and they were never addressed. And as time goes on, that lingers and lingers and can take a significant toll on someone.
So I have a question, Dr. Dosha. So
Yes.
you had mentioned during the beginning in terms of the statistics with the numbers going up regarding to depression, because we are in that pandemic phase where people were locked more or less behind closed doors, not able to go out or maybe be in the midst of friends. Was that the cause of the increase in numbers of depression during this period of time?
Yes, that's one factor. The other factor that we know, of course, has been a big factor is also substance abuse, because people have been isolated. Increased use of illegal substances, alcohol, drugs also went up significantly too. We've also seen a significant increase in even opioid deaths, and because of that isolation from not having your family and friends to say, hey, you're going far beyond where you should be. Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and I have another question. What do you say, and I've heard people say, going back to the question that Pastor Rawls had asked about dementia, individuals I've heard say, well, Uncle Joe, my great uncle or my great aunt, they had dementia. What's my chances of getting? Is it hereditary? Does that play a role in it in terms of your family history? And if so, how?
Well, there's some dementias, so here's the deal. In medicine, right? Almost any condition is 80% non-factor for genetics. So 20% is genetics, and 80% is mostly lifestyle, right? So there's 20% of dementia that comes from genetics. But even with genetics, right, there's still do to delay the onset of the disease. All right. Having the gene for a lot of diseases doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that. I mean, there's certain things that are what we call dominant genes. There are a few diseases that we know that are dominant genes that no matter what you do, it is going to come out, right? But dementia, 80% is preventable. 80% of all dementias. Now, Alzheimer's dementia is a one spectrum of dementia, but most dementias are not due to Alzheimer's. All right, they're due to vascular dementia, cardiovascular disease. So plaques, cholesterol plaques that builds in the part of the brain that controls memory, high blood pressure that causes mini strokes in the part of the brain that controls memory. Those are things that really leads to a majority of the dementia that people have.
So I just want to say real quick to the people that are watching on social media, if you have a question, just type it in and I'll make sure I monitor it pretty closely and I'll ask you a question. So just those that are watching on social media, if there's a question that you have for Dr. Adocha, just make sure you type it in and I'll get your question presented. Dr. Adocha, as a ministry, one thing that I really try to do is kind of really take a survey of our community and offer ministries that meet those needs or address the needs that are in our community. And so in listening to you, you started out saying something that kind of threw me off by, just our eating and things like that affects so many other areas, things that never, you talk about the processed foods, things that never, that we never had to deal with. And then you also, you also, it's slipping out of my mind. I hope it's not dementia, but it'll come back in a little bit. But what as a ministry, what are some beginning things that we have a health ministry, and in the health ministry we have mental health, we have numbers, we have movement, and we have diet. But it might not even be involved in that. But what's something at an elementary level that the other thing that slipped out of my mind when you said that, when you talked about that, that going to the doctor, that going for that annual checkup, how important it is to do that, just so if there is some other mental health issues. I never knew why they asked me about the drinking and the depression and stuff like that. I just filled it out. And so that was new to me. What's something that we can do at the elementary level, whether it's something to kind of ensure that annual visit, or what some elementary things that we can do to begin to create a culture that puts us in a position where we're not at high risk, as high risk for what you're talking about? What are some simple things that we can do in our ministry?
Well, the simple thing that I think that we all need to start from the beginning is really about what we're eating. All right. That's the basic thing. So when on Sundays after church, everybody get together to eat, right? That's the basic elementary place that we got to start from. That we start to re-educate folks that, listen, okay, as a church, let's start from here first. Okay, when we have that dinner, we're not going to serve certain types of foods. We're going to serve foods that really is the way God made the food.
Right.
All right. I mean, that's what I would say. If you just like, again, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, and you can add broccoli to that. You can add spinach. You can add collard greens, but you got to take away. So how about, instead of saying an apple a day keeps the doctor away, a bacon a day puts doctors in your life. Maybe that would be a term that we need to add. That really, when we eat the wrong things, that brings the doctors into our lives. I have some patients who are in their 90s, 80s, don't take any medicine, right? 70s, late 70s, nothing, right? And when you take a history, say, what do you eat? What activity do you do? People who every day, they make sure they go for a walk, of course, in this day and age, and also education about, we see on TV famous people that we have to watch, and we spend too much time, sedentary lifestyle, watching media, right? People are making millions in lieu of our health, right? Yes, there's Netflix, there's YouTube, there's all these things, right? We have to relearn. There's a limit. You spend your whatever hour, you move on. And that's will be the basic things I would say. It's about what we're serving and what we're eating.
We really need to be the example.
Yes.
Be what we expect people to practice when they're away from church. Practice that at church. Okay.
So the thing I tell my patients, I only see them for 15, 20 minutes. What I tell them when they're with me it's just the basic time they spend with me. It's about what they do when they go home, when they sit with their family on the dining table. That's really where the action is. That's where the health is. The health of any any person is really about the foods they eat. You know, is the foods that we eat, and the quantity is not really the key. It's about the foods that we eat, because there are foods that are toxic to our bodies. That we eat causes a lot of inflammation, causes a lot of damage. We've seen a significant increase in colon cancer in the last 10 years, where people now in their 40s and 30s are getting colon cancer. And the number one cause of that is about what the person has been eating all their life, and nothing else really. I mean, I have patients in their 30s with colon cancer, 40s with colon cancer. It's the increase of processed drinks, soda, energy drinks. Even though we're in Gainesville, we benefit from selling those kind of drinks. All those things are not good. Processed sugar, high fructose corn syrup. But unfortunately, there are bigger forces that have more influence, that causes influence on what we do. Again, the TV, the ads on TV tells us.
I suppose maybe the graft and grip from that, not to a higher level doctor.
Yeah, if you eat certain things, you can do certain things, and they sell it with celebrities, and we buy those things. Mm-hmm. So we need to support our farmers.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The folks who are growing plants in the ground, who are the butchers who are killing the animal and meat, and not the companies that are take those things and repackage them and sell it back to us, and put things in there that makes it addictive.
So if it's not in the condition that in the format that God made it, and man has gone and done something else to, I guess, make it sellable.
Yes.
You understand that's when it becomes bad, when we
get
it outside of the way that God made it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Whole foods is what we need. Foods that are the way it is. It doesn't really matter what it is. If it's animal products, yes, most animal meat, of course, have cholesterol and fat, but they're not necessarily bad for us. If you eat the lean portion of it, if it's eating the way it is. So point being, if you get a pig and the pig is slaughtered, the meat, it's fine. But when you take that meat and make it into something else, then it's no longer good for you.
I got you.
When you take beef and you make it into something else, it's no longer good for you, right? But if you eat the beef the way it's made, you retain all the natural nutrients in it, right? Once it's taken away and processed, they put chemicals in it. I mean, most of the things that are processed can sit on shelves for a year. They can sit on the shelf for 6 months, for 2 years. I mean, that can't be good for anybody, and it isn't good for anybody.
It is. Dr. Adosha, I have a comment and a question, or two comments. You had mentioned the book Blue Zone, which I will add to my library.
Okay.
I do it
Good,
online,
fantastic.
and a lot of good stuff is in that book. So I'm going to add that to my library. You had mentioned also in terms of the food that we eat, and not only that, what we serve our families. And should it start also with our children? How do we expect them that we're pretty much we're sending out a negative message by what we eat, and then we feed our young children this. This is how they start and develop that in terms of, this is what I call a balanced meal. So starting from basics, what about what we feed our family, and especially our children? Should our children be educated so that when they do mature and grow older, that they will already have this way of eating already embedded in them?
Sure. Absolutely. There's been a lot of studies that have shown that, of course, the way the kids, when you raise children, how you raise them and what you raise them with becomes what they're going to eat when they become adults. Because if not, when they get to adulthood, it becomes difficult for them to wean themselves off the things they were raised at home. And again, the problem is this, right? There's a lot of external pressures, right? Lots of external pressures. that have a huge influence on what we feed our kids. I mean, maybe I've told you this before, right? When you go to the grocery store, you go to Publix, go into the store, make a right, go all around the outside of the store and buy all the things on the outside and leave. When you start going into the aisles is when you start buying things that are not good for you.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
All right. There's nothing in the aisles unless it's toilet paper.
You can't eat that.
Right? Nothing. Right. So, and that's a key, right? I mean, once the kids start early, you start feeding them and ignore the outside influence, the Kellogg, whatever, all their cartoon characters that sell cereal that are laden with food coloring and processed sugars. So that outside influence is a big factor. And that becomes a really challenge for a lot of parents, because in this day and age, a lot of parents, TV become a pacifier for the children, right? So when they watch the TV, they see those ads, they see the cartoons, and they go to the grocery store, you go into the aisle, the cartoon character is in a box of food.
Mhm.
The kid wants it.
Mhm.
So, but again, if you stay on the periphery of the grocery store, you will never encounter any of those characters. And you can get your fruit, you can get your meat, you can get your vegetables, you can get your flowers, you can get all that. And you can get your water. Even waters are not in the aisle. They usually leave them outside where you can pick them up and go.
Dr. Docha, do you know any stores that sell ice cream on the outer aisles, on the outside?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you must be.
Is there one? I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm trying to figure out how I can stay on the outside and still get my Browers ice cream.
Yeah, you got to stay on the outside. I mean, you can still buy the things you need to make ice cream on the outside and go home and bake it yourself.
Okay.
Right? So,
Here's
yeah,
a question. Here's a question that says, I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. Will probiotics help with the discomfort from lots of fiber?
Here's what probiotics are. So the vegetables themselves, fruits and vegetables, are what we call prebiotic, right? So the prebiotics will help you make the probiotics,
Mhm.
right? So the fruits and vegetables is what leads to the good bacteria in your gut that helps you to make your own probiotics. All right, so eating fruits and vegetables and then taking probiotics is just a double thing you're doing. And the reason the person probably has the abdominal discomfort is not from the vegetables, it's from the other things most likely they're also consuming.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? So and we get that. Somebody, yes, you eat all the other things, then you eat fruits and vegetables as a buffer, but then you got to let the other bad things you've eaten do their job too, but fruits and vegetables shouldn't really cause discomfort. If the person is drinking enough fluid and enough water, all that should help to digest and get and add fiber to the gut, which shouldn't cause any abdominal discomfort.
So here's another one. What causes leaky gut?
Well, leaky gut is an issue of,
and I don't even know what it is. So if you can explain what it is also.
Yeah, is an issue of permeability. So normally in the gut, we have a tight membrane. There's something called a membrane. All the cells are really tight together. In some people, they have an issue where their gut, the cells are not as tight as it should be. So they lose electrolytes in the gut that can lead to diarrhea and constipation. But ultimately, again, those things are caused by what the person has been eating. The wrong diet is key. The wrong diet leads to a lot of things. The right diet, and those diets are, again, whole natural foods. Processed foods are really the main issue. Some people eat things they may be allergic to and not even know about that. So we have patients who are allergic to gluten, right? Gluten is also a processed kind of carbohydrates that they add to a lot of things, right? So if you're allergic to that as well, that can also lead you to have diarrhea, abdominal cramping, etc. But again, it all comes down to eating the right natural diets, avoiding processed foods.
So let me pose something then. So I think in listening to you, I think one of the lures to eating processed food or the wrong food might be price, because I think about what's going on the outside. So if I'm getting string beans, I might be able to go get a can of string beans that's processed, I'm assuming, for $1.29. And so I'm thinking it's processed because it's on the aisles. I'm doing this aisle thing. But if I go around to the fresh things and I might pay $1, I might pay $1.49 a pound. And so it seems like I might have to pay more to get the healthy food. Is
Sure.
that one of the lures that's out there to because it's cheaper to eat the food that kills you?
Yeah, but you know, it is at the end of the day too. I always make sure that people understand that staying healthy is also an investment in ourselves, right?
Okay.
And investment takes resources. But I think most people are able to make the sacrifice, especially health-wise, to make sure that, because if the health is not taken care of now, you're going to end up paying more for a lot more in the future. That will end up costing you way more than the little bit of money that you would spend more to get the healthy foods, right? So, and that's always a key. And I do hear that a lot, where healthy foods are more expensive, but it's an investment. Investment will, there's got to be, yes, there's got to be something that you put in there to make that work.
And then serving communities that might not have the greatest financial resources, maybe there's some things that we can maybe try to get involved in to assist at decreasing those costs to eat healthy. So like right now, we're trying to on the east side of Gainesville, we've been having meetings with the city commission and community that trying to bring in it's really a food desert, but because of certain things, it's not designated as a food desert. But sounds like we need to be thinking also not so much just a grocery store, but a grocery store that really offers a great deal of healthy options, but that we can keep affordable. And maybe there might be some incentives that that can be offered that we can help keep it affordable, or the residents still might not use it if it's priced too high.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing always is a farmer's market where we can get local farmers bring in fruits and vegetables, you know, and that's always a big way to offset the costs, where the local farmers bring fruits and vegetables, and that becomes a way that the community can also buy those kind of foods as well, you know, have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, of course, it's difficult. I know that it would never happen where, you know, most people will just totally avoid processed foods. It's really about the reality. It's about percentage. How much percentage of what you're eating every day is processed food? We live in a country, in a community where it's almost impossible to avoid processed foods, but the processed foods cannot become the majority of what our diet, you know, consists of.
Okay.
You know, the reality is that processed foods may be 20% of your diet, and the other 80% would have to be, you know, non-processed foods. It would be great if we have 100% non-processed foods, but the reality that it's not the reality.
So here's a question that they understand the idea of fresh vegetables being the best, but they ask the question, are frozen vegetables better than canned vegetables?
Frozen, yes, frozen vegetables are better than canned vegetables, especially canned vegetables, right? A lot of them, they add increased salt for preservation. So canned vegetables most times end up with more added salt than if they're frozen. Yes.
Oh, that's good to know.
more questions?
It's good stuff. Anybody else
Yeah.
have any? Go ahead, sir. All right. Anybody else have any more questions for Dr. Adocha? I think we need to be thinking, you know, because we don't just have these talks just to have these talks. We have these talks to make sure that we offer ministry that that empowers people
Absolutely.
and enhances their life. And so I think that, you know, we need to, you know, when we're talking about, you know, our culinary ministry and just activities that we do, we need to keep these things in mind because it's so connected. You know, in the beginning, he talked about how the whole body is connected, you know, whether it's the, you know, the leg or the mind, it's all connected. And if diet plays this big of a role, you know, we need to lead by example. And so when we're thinking of our menus and things like that, you know, really begin to think about what we're being taught. And he gave us a little wiggle room, you know, saying that, you know, it's almost impossible to go completely without process, but the majority of what we eat should not be processed. And I mean, if we can even reduce it lower than the majority, getting going downwards and not upwards with process, I think we put our ministry, we set an example for our ministry. I remember there was a session we had with a women's ministry once that was at a church that I pastored, where someone that's really into healthy food, they brought in food and showed ways that you can still make it taste good, but not reduce the health quality of it, but still make it taste good. And they did something like that. And so maybe we just need to start putting in some work and finding ways to still satisfy the palate, but also give ourselves an opportunity to live a quality life, you know, the older we get.
Absolutely. Yeah, so absolutely. So whenever you guys have things like this that you need a speaker, I'm always available to, if my schedule permits, to come on and,
all right,
and share.
You know, Dr. Adocha, you know this is being recorded, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I got your word. You said
Yes,
it on
yes.
video.
Again, I'll repeat. You know, if you need me in the future, I'm available to come out and speak. And this is important. You know, it's very important to really spread this message.
So either am I not suffering from mental issues, or because I told you I fill out that form all the time, but never realized why I fill out the form, and my doctors never said anything to me that made me realize that there was an evaluation in what I wrote
going on.
of all
Yeah.
that also of my mental well-being. So is the doctor not going through things with me, or he's probably not seeing, is he just not seeing stuff that triggers a conversation?
There's a score. So that PHQ-9, where we ask you, you know, score is 0, 1, 2, and 3, there's a score. So when you circle the numbers, they add them up. If it scores a certain amount, then there's not really anything to discuss. So which means the person is fine. But if the score is a certain number, then yes, they should bring that up. Say, hey, you know, I see you filled out this form. You mentioned that X, Y, and Z is going on. Can we talk more about it? And how can we do something to not make this, you know, to get worse than what it is? So yes, so the questionnaire has a score. If the score most times is below 10, then most you know, physicians there's nothing to really do about that. But it's 10 and beyond, 8 and beyond, then yes, the person has depression that needs to be talked about. So it's an indirect way to ask people questions than just coming and asking them, are you depressed? And most people are like, you know, not really. But if you have them ask that simple question, you know, how do you sleep? Well, you know, well enough? You know, do you not have interest in doing things?
Right.
You know, all those simple questions. When we ask them, he gives us a lot, and you let the person tell you, you know, is it serious? Is it not serious to you? Does it bother you a lot? And based on those answers, it's really what we use to determine, do we need to move further and do other things. But the only way that we know is the person showed up at the office or wherever and filled out those forms or have that conversation. Because you will never find out until you ask those questions. because unfortunately, depression has a stigma, right? Most people do not even want to accept or talk about issues of depression. There are issues of that, being depressed has a stigma of, weakness, is a stigma that the person has done something wrong. So all those stigmas a lot of times prevent folks from talking about trying to open up and really talk about those things.
And I think that's probably me. I mean, I don't think I'm depressed or suffering from anything, but I think the ideas of admitting stuff like that,
Yeah,
in my mind, it might not be right, but I can only talk about my mind.
sure.
Does kind of exemplify weakness. How do you get out of that place to where you're the one that's supposed to be strong, and you don't let something like that beat you? How do you even get out of that place? Because I think if I did suffer depression, I don't think that I would admit it.
Yeah, and the key for that again is if somebody has a rapport with their provider, right? If you have a physician or clinician they have a rapport with, that allows you to open up to them. And the person is open enough to ask you certain questions and engage you. There'll be no reason, depression is not always something we come out and say, are you depressed? But those questions, about sleeping, those questions about, eating, either under eating, overeating, those questions are they're valid questions that allows us to really see the person and figure out how can we deduce other things that are going on.
That's good stuff. Good stuff. All right, Roxalina, I don't see any more questions on social media.
Okay. This has just been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. A lot of good, valuable information, and a place to start. As you said, Pastor, on the elementary level, what can we do as individuals for ourselves, for our families, and also for our ministries? So, I mean, this has just opened up a lot of ways and opportunities for us to take advantage of the information that Dr. Adosha has provided us with, that we can go away tonight with, being proactive, not sitting back waiting for things to happen, but to be proactive. What can we do to have a quality life as we continue to mature and get older? I think that's what it did for me. And I hope that it also did, for others as well. Very good information. And Dr. Adosha, I would just like to thank you. Thank you for this time, and also for the very short notice that, I asked, you said, yes, I'm willing to do that.
Absolutely. Anytime, like I said, whenever this kind of things come up, if I'm available, I will definitely be open to come on and talk more about these issues.
So, Dr. Adosha, are you in Gainesville? Are you in Gainesville?
Yes. So here's the deal. I've been a physician here in Gainesville for 21 years. I'm in private practice, and my practice, our focus is how do we help people to restore their health, right? How do we help an individual that comes to see us with diabetes that's out of control? How do we help them to restore their health? And not necessarily with medicine, but again, restore their health by making sure that we are re-engaging the person on what they need to be doing in the first place. And that's a difficult thing because most patients are not used to having a doctor try to say, listen, let's go back and start from the beginning, right? So here's the deal. The Affordable Care Act or the Obamacare has lots of things in the healthcare law that allows us to really spend time talking about and doing things for prevention. It's not just about, quote, pre-existing condition where we're trying to deal with people who are already sick. It also allows us to deal with people who are not sick already, people who are on their path to sickness, so we can intervene on time and offer them services that will help them to not become sick. And that's really the future of medicine. The future is into keep treating things that are already broken. We want to help patients restore their health, right? Cure diabetes, cure cardiovascular disease, cure hypertension, right? All those things are doable. Right? Things only get out of hand when the individual either doesn't believe that there's a way to do this, or they're just not really willing to participate in what needs to be done, right? So, the mission that I like all of us to really work on is how do we prevent these chronic diseases? This chronic disease is killing us, especially as a Black community. The chronic illness that, again, 80% of all these chronic diseases, 80% is preventable. 80%. And that's a huge number. And you're talking billions, if not trillions of dollars, right, that are being spent on disease treatment. You're talking about patients, right? So listen, it's not just about the healthcare itself, right? There are many other things that goes with bad healthcare, right? Issue as we talk about, social parity, racial parity, and all these other things. Healthcare is a big factor in that. Healthcare is a big factor because when we die early, that takes away time, knowledge, wisdom that we can give to our young generation. When we're not there as older folks, our young folks suffer, and that suffering carries on forever for them. It carries on for their next generation as well.
Dr. Cole has a question.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Dr. Cole, you have a question?
Yes, sir. Dr. Dosha.
Yes.
My question
Hi.
is, if you could speak to give us an idea of how to get our children. I'm looking at more and more teenagers, our children, even preteens are overweight.
Sure.
And I think it's because of a lot of sugary drinks, along with some of the other bad things that they are getting into their bodies. So how can we help the parents to be more aware of what we're giving our children at an early age? Because there's so much obesity I see in the younger generation.
Absolutely. And again, it's difficult, right? Because again, we have so many outside external forces that have a lot of influence, a lot of resources that really drowns, everything. But this thing really starts from family, from home, where as the kids are growing up, issues about formula, milk, again, all the things that Tony the Tiger, yes, Tony the Tiger and everybody else on TV. So it's a big. I wish I had the answer. If I had the answer, or if I had the solution, but I really don't. I just don't have that. But it's really a community thing. It takes a village. It takes family to try to limit. Number one, parents have, I know we blame kids for a lot of things they do, but parents have control. In my house, my kid's iPad, I control it. Right. I control the TV. Right. Their Xbox, I have the code to it. Only when I put the code can they play it. All right. Their iPads, me and my wife have the codes to it. So they check it in and check it out with us. I think, those are basic things, So for a lot of parents, unfortunately, they use technology to pacify the children, right? They use technology to say, take my phone, go away. Right? So the kids sit there, they have a bag of potato chips next to them. They have a bag of, Gatorade, Powerade and Gatorade that they sell us, that if you drink this, you're going to be LeBron James. If you drink this, you're going to be Michael Jordan. But yes, it's true if you're actively participating in sports, right? If you're sitting on the couch, Gatorade is not your friend. There's nothing you're doing with it. But all it's doing is packing on calories on you. So, and that's the thing. Parents just need to, somehow we need to be more educated about what the outside influence has on our children. And we as the adults need to be the ones to really filter out what's good and what's not good for our kids. As difficult as it is, but that's really, I think that's kind of where we need to start, is to how do we get our kids to not live a sedentary lifestyle? How do we avoid them from eating all these things that I've mentioned earlier, the processed foods, the outside influence that tells us that this is what we have to eat.
Doc, can you hear me, Doc?
Yeah, hey, I can hear you. Good evening. How are you?
I'm a kind of this. My name is Byron Cohen. I'm Cohen. I'm gonna try to address this to the pastor. I was just listening about healthy eating, and then Dr. Cole just really kind of touched where I was going with the young folk. As a church, I look back when you say go back, and I look back and I look at a lot of African shows and stuff. I think one thing the church could do, I'm just throwing this out there that I haven't seen, is a green thumb ministry for young people to be able to grow vegetables around the church. Just have a little garden and be able to understand the beginning process of it growing and the finishing process. And I think they'll be wanting to taste that. And that's kind of like, to me, a starting point to like see the importance of vegetables. And and that don't take a lot of money to do aside of the church. Just dig a little spot and just have a little green thumb ministry. And I think that's a part that the church can play a role. We have a lot of avenues, but when she said young people, and then you saying about parents, but could you imagine young people getting into that and go share that with their mothers? So I just throwing that out there, something to think about, a green thumb ministry for the young people.
Absolutely.
Just throwing something out there.
Excellent.
Yeah. But, I mean, all that also goes into the same spectrum of, again, education, right? We have to education. As we know things that are right, we share it. As we know things that are bad, we share that as well. And we really need to start from the beginning and re-educate. That the outside influences that are influencing what we're doing. Have patients who drink 2 liters of Coke. I'm like, how much soda do you drink? Oh, some of them, I look in their car by accident, in the back seat, there are bottles of soda. And then, so, and of course, the issue of that as well is we also have to understand that there's also a factor of dependency that goes with all these products, right? Sugar is addictive. All these processed foods have some element of dependency and addiction that goes with them, that becomes its own problem as well.
Good. Well, we got a response to that green thumb suggestion. It says, Reverend, let's put Byron in charge of that, and I'll bring the soil and manure. So it looks like we got something started.
Yeah, it's always good to even build a greenhouse. My wife built a greenhouse. We have a greenhouse. That she just one day got up and built one. Well, it didn't take her a day to build it, but it took her a few months for us to build a greenhouse. Those are things that can also be done. Greenhouse allows you to grow certain things in there too as well. Keeps the vegetables and fruits going on for a lot longer. But the key is that, yes, everybody needs to take more. Okay, the issue is this. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to being more responsible for our health. That we cannot rely on outside influence to determine what happens to our health.
And Doc,
because our health is the most important thing.
Doc, I think it was an inside joke when he said that about manure and stuff. They was talking about me. I'm brother.
Oh, is that right?
I'm still trying to get trying to figure out, like he's trying to do with that ice cream. I'm trying to figure out that out with them little Debbie's on. I was
Is that
just
right?
trying to say something to help out with the churn, but I'm just feeding back on the pastor there. Doc, you're doing a good job, so don't let that distract you. You're doing a good job. Amen.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
A wonderful discussion. This was a great discussion. And
Yeah.
and we have to make sure that we are the example. We have to take responsibility. We can't wait for somebody else to do it. And you all have heard me say it many times before. We all we got. We can't expect for someone else to fix our issues. We get the
Yes.
information and then we put the information into practice. And so I think as a ministry, we got a lot of good information. And so our health ministry needs to put together some points from this and things that we can do at the beginning level to begin to create a culture through education and then practice that can improve the quality of life of our people. So I Dr. Adoji, I really appreciate you taking time, and I definitely will be asking Roxalina, at an appropriate time to where we don't overburden you, but to kind of keep us on your radar and keep us informed, so that we can improve our community. And Roxalina, I appreciate you forming this relationship, and I'll give you the final words.
Okay, again, we thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for attending. And Dr. Adoja, thank you so much again for your time and valuable information. I'm sure that each one of us have something to carry away that will be able to help us in the future. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And have a good
Thank you for
evening.
having me. Thank you for letting me the opportunity to come and share my thoughts and things. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody have a great day.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Good night.